You're standing in the ruins of Hellas, a Greek city-state in the southern Peloponnese. The year is 740 before Christ. The smoke from burning buildings still drifts across what used to be the agora, the marketplace where citizens gathered. The Spartan army departed 3 days ago. They took the men. The young ones anyway. The old men and boys are dead in the streets. You can still smell it. But the women aren't dead. That would have been mercy. What the Spartans did to the wives and daughters of conquered enemies wasn't execution. It was transformation. A systematic process of stripping away humanity and replacing it with a new identity built entirely on servitude and sexual availability. This is the origin story of the Helots, the massive enslaved underclass that made Sparta's warrior society possible. And here's what your history textbooks didn't tell you. The Helot system wasn't just about military conquest. It was about deliberate, psychological destruction, targeting specifically the women of defeated peoples. Welcome to the machinery that powered ancient Sparta's military supremacy. And here's what makes it especially sinister. They called it divine right. Picture this. Your city has surrendered to Sparta after a siege. Maybe you fought. Maybe you tried to negotiate. Doesn't matter. Sparta doesn't do negotiated peace. The soldiers enter the city in formation, disciplined, organized. These aren't bandits or raiders. These are professional warriors operating under official policy. They separate the population immediately, men to one side, women and children to another. What happens next is systematic. Act 1. The selection. You're a woman standing in the central square with hundreds of others. Your husband is somewhere in that group of men, being marched out of the city. You don't know if he's alive. Spartan officers walk through the crowd of women. They're looking for specific things: age, physical condition, signs of status. The elderly women past childbearing age are marked with chalk on the shoulder. The very young girls, prepubescent, are marked differently. Everyone else is divided into 3 categories. Here's what we know from Plutarch's description of the Helot system and from archaeological evidence of conquered territories. The categorization was brutally pragmatic. Category 1. Women of childbearing age who show signs of education or status. These are the wives and daughters of the defeated city's elite. They're dressed better a wife. They carry themselves differently. Category 2. Younger women. Healthy, strong, from common families. The wives of farmers, merchants, craftsmen. Category 3. Women identified as already enslaved in your own society. Sparta's about to make their situation exponentially worse. Each category has a different fate. But here's the thing that should terrify you. All of them involve systematic sexual exploitation. The only question is the methodology. Think about what's happening psychologically. You've just watched your city fall. Your father, brothers, husband might be dead or enslaved. Now strange men are examining you like livestock, marking you with chalk, sorting you into groups. And you're starting to realize this is organized. This isn't random violence. This is procedure. The women of Category 1, the elite women, are separated first. They're taken to a different part of the city, not to holding cells, to what used to be wealthy homes, the nicest buildings still standing. Here's what Spartan policy dictated. According to later Greek historians who tried to make sense of Sparta's practices, elite women from conquered cities were assigned directly to Spartan military officers as concubines. But here's the specific cruelty. They weren't just raped. They were transformed into symbols of conquest. You're the wife of the city's former general, or a magistrate, or a wealthy landowner. You had status, education, respect. Your husband was a man of importance. Now, you're the sexual property of the Spartan warrior who killed him. And here's where the psychological warfare becomes obvious. You're required to maintain the appearance of your former status. You're not dressed in rags. You're not mocked as a slave in the traditional sense. You're dressed in fine clothing. You're seated at dinner parties. You're presented as the warrior's companion. But everyone knows what you actually are, including you. Plutarch describes this practice obliquely when discussing Spartan marriage customs. He notes that Spartan warriors often maintained women of the conquered peoples in their households, and that these women occupied an ambiguous status between captive and companion. That ambiguity was the point. You're not quite a slave, so you can't fully accept that identity, but you're absolutely not free, so you can't maintain your former sense of self. You exist in psychological limbo, trapped between identities, neither fully enslaved nor remotely free. And you're watching your daughters grow up in the same household, knowing exactly what will happen to them when they reach puberty. This was policy, documented in multiple sources, practiced for generations, not the action of a few cruel individuals, but systematic practice endorsed by the Spartan state. If you believe that the documented machinery of systematic exploitation in ancient warfare needs to be remembered, consider liking this video and subscribing. Your support helps expose the historical realities that classical civilization tried to romanticize away. Act 2. The Agricultural Helots. Your Category 2. Common woman, wife of a farmer or craftsman. You're marched out of the city along with hundreds of others. The Spartans are taking you to their territory, to Laconia and Messenia, the regions Sparta controls. The journey takes days. You're walking, barely fed, no shelter at night. Some women don't make it, the elderly, the sick, they're left behind. No one stops to help them. When you arrive, you're assigned to land, specific plots of agricultural territory that belong to Spartan citizens. Here's how the Helot system functioned, based on ancient sources and modern archaeological analysis of Spartan settlements. Every Spartan citizen was allotted a plot of land called a kleros. They didn't work this land themselves. Spartans were warriors, full-time, from age 7. So who worked the land? Helots, enslaved people from conquered territories. And the system was designed to be self-perpetuating. You're assigned to a kleros. You work the land. You grow the crops. You turn over the majority of the harvest to your Spartan master. And here's where it becomes actually systematic. You're expected to reproduce. The Spartan citizen who owns your labor doesn't just want your work. He wants your children, because your children will be the next generation of Helots. So you're not just agricultural labor, you're a reproductive machinery. The Spartan master visits the land periodically to inspect the crops, to take the harvest, and to exercise his rights over the female Helots working his property. Think about what this means. You're enslaved, you're required to work the land, and you're sexually available to your owner whenever he decides to visit. And if you become pregnant, that child is born into the same system, automatically enslaved, automatically assigned to work the same land you work. The Helot system perpetuated itself through forced reproduction. Your enslavement doesn't end with your life. It extends through your children, your grandchildren, on and on. Ancient sources indicate that Helots outnumbered Spartan citizens by ratios as high as 7-1 or even 10-1. Where did all those Helots come from? Conquest initially, but maintenance through generations, forced reproduction. The women of conquered cities weren't just enslaved, they were transformed into reproductive engines that powered Sparta's demographic stability. Here's what makes this especially horrifying. Spartan law explicitly prohibited marriage between Spartans and Helots. Your children couldn't ever become Spartan, but they could be acknowledged by Spartan fathers and given slightly elevated status within the Helot hierarchy. So the system created incentive for sexual submission. If you accommodated your master's desires, your children might be treated marginally better, given supervisory roles, slightly more food. It wasn't rape in the chaotic, random sense. It was rape as bureaucracy, systemized, incentivized, multi-generational. Act 3. The Household Slaves. Your Category 3. Already enslaved in your own city before Sparta conquered it. Now you're enslaved by Sparta. Your situation is about to get exponentially worse. You're taken to Sparta proper, the city itself. You're assigned to a Spartan household to serve a Spartan family directly. Here's what we know about household helots from ancient sources, particularly Xenophon's writings about Spartan society. They had access to the most intimate spaces of Spartan life. They prepared food, they cleaned homes, they cared for children, and they were sexually accessible to everyone in the household. The Spartan master, his sons, once they reached a certain age. Sometimes even the Spartan wife would designate you for use by a male relative or honored guest. Your body wasn't your own, it was household property. And everyone in the household had access rights. Think about the psychology. In your previous enslavement, horrible as it was, there were usually defined parameters. A specific owner, understood limitations, however brutal. Now, you're available to an entire family structure, multiple people with authority over you, each with different demands, different cruelties. And you're watching other household helots, the ones who've been there longer. You see what years of this does to people. They move through the household like ghosts, silent, obedient. Their eyes don't focus on anything. They've learned that making eye contact invites attention, and attention invites use. So they practice invisibility. They become as much like furniture as possible, because that's the only survival strategy available. But here's the specific Spartan cruelty that appears in multiple ancient sources: the Cryptia. The Cryptia was a Spartan rite of passage for young warriors. Boys around age 18, having completed most of their military training, would be sent into the countryside with minimal supplies. Their mission: hunt and kill helots. Plutarch describes it explicitly. The magistrates from time to time sent out into the countryside the most discreet of the young warriors, equipped only with daggers and necessary supplies. In the daytime they scattered into obscure locations and remained quiet, but at night they came down to the roads and murdered any helot they encountered. Think about what that means. You're a helot woman working in the fields, or walking between settlements, or simply existing in the wrong place at the wrong time. And Spartan teenagers are hunting you for practice, as part of their training to become warriors. This wasn't war. This wasn't combat. This was state-sanctioned murder of enslaved people as educational curriculum. The sources suggest that Cryptia participants specifically targeted helots who showed signs of strength, intelligence, or potential for resistance. The practice served dual purposes: military training and population control, through eliminating anyone who might organize rebellion. But here's what the sources don't usually emphasize, but which becomes clear from careful reading. Young women were primary targets, not because they were the most dangerous physically, but because they were reproductive threats. Every helot woman of childbearing age represented dozens of potential future helots. Killing them was demographic warfare, and for the young Spartan warriors, it was also sexual violence with lethality. Ancient sources hint darkly that the Cryptia murders weren't always quick. Thucydides mentions in his history of the Peloponnesian War that in 425 before Christ, the Spartans became concerned about helot loyalty during wartime. They announced that helots who had served bravely in military campaigns could apply for freedom. 2,000 helots applied. They were taken to temples crowned with garlands and celebrated as newly freed men. Then the Spartans disappeared them, all 2,000. The sources say no one knew how each of them perished. That's not random cruelty. That's calculated terror. The message to the remaining helot population: don't seek freedom. Don't distinguish yourselves. Don't trust promises. Stay obedient. Stay invisible, or die. Now imagine you're a helot woman who witnessed that, who maybe had a brother or son among those 2,000. You already know your body isn't your own. Now you know your life can be erased at any moment, even if you do everything right. That's the psychological environment Spartan policy created. Total control through total terror. Act 4. The Dionysian Rituals. Here's where we have to discuss something that ancient sources mention obliquely, but never fully detail: the religious festivals where helot women were required to participate in Dionysian rites. Dionysus was the god of wine, fertility, ritual madness. His worship involved ecstatic dancing, alcohol consumption, and sexual abandon. In most Greek city-states, these festivals involved citizens voluntarily participating. In Sparta, Helot women were required to attend. Plutarch mentions this practice briefly. He notes that Helot women were compelled to perform dances of an unseemly nature at Spartan festivals, and that this was intended to demonstrate to Spartan youth the ugliness of drunkenness and abandon. Think about what that actually means. You're forced to get drunk, to dance provocatively, to engage in sexual behavior publicly, not because you choose to, but because you're ordered to. And the purpose is to humiliate you in front of Spartan citizens, to demonstrate your inferiority, to serve as a living example of what Spartans consider degraded behavior. You're not just exploited privately, you're exploited as public spectacle. Your degradation is entertainment and education for the society that enslaved you. The ancient sources don't detail exactly what happened during these festivals, but they use phrases like compelled to perform acts that free women would refuse and degradations that served Spartan educational purposes. Read between those lines. Free women would refuse. These women couldn't. The degradations served purposes. What purposes? Demonstrating Spartan superiority by forcing public sexual humiliation of the enslaved. This was policy, repeated annually. Part of the religious calendar. Systematic degradation embedded in sacred ritual. Act 5. The intergenerational trap. You've survived. Years have passed. You've borne children. Maybe to your Spartan master. Maybe to other helots. Doesn't matter. They're all enslaved. And now you're watching your daughter grow up in the same system. She's 12 years old. She's starting to look like a woman. You see the way the Spartan master looks at her now. The way his sons look at her. You know exactly what's coming, because it happened to you. And it happened to your mother before you, if she was conquered by Sparta. This is the true horror of the system. It's not just what happened to one generation. It's the knowledge that it will happen to every generation afterward. Your grandmother might have been a free woman in a proud city-state. Your mother was enslaved when that city fell. You were born into slavery, and your daughter will die in slavery. 3, 4, 5 generations. The original conquest becomes distant history. But the sexual exploitation continues. Systematized, normalized, perpetual. Ancient demographic studies of Spartan territory suggest that the Helot population remained relatively stable for centuries, despite the Cryptia murders and harsh working conditions. How? Forced reproduction. The system balanced its own brutality through mandatory population replacement. You weren't just a slave. You were a reproductive unit in a demographic equation that Sparta's leaders calculated with cold precision. Here's what happened to the Helots eventually, and this is important because it shows what they became despite everything designed to break them. In 370 before Christ, Theban forces under General Epaminondas invaded Sparta and liberated Messenia. Thousands of Helots were suddenly freed. They didn't dissolve into chaos. They didn't collapse into the degraded creatures Sparta had tried to make them. They rebuilt. They reorganized their cities. They established a functioning state with remarkable speed. Because underneath centuries of systematic exploitation, they'd maintained memory. They'd preserved culture. They'd passed down stories of who they were before conquest. Sparta had enslaved their bodies and exploited their reproduction. But they hadn't successfully destroyed their identity. That's not a happy ending. Thousands of people suffered across generations for that moment of liberation. But it reveals something crucial. The machinery of systematic degradation, sophisticated as it was, ultimately failed its primary objective. Sparta wanted to break these people completely, to make them into something less than human, to transform wives and daughters of proud warriors into perpetual sexual and agricultural machinery. They failed because human dignity, even when systematically attacked across generations, has a resilience that brutality cannot fully extinguish. Now we have to confront the silence. We have extensive written sources about Sparta: Plutarch, Xenophon, Thucydides. Dozens of ancient authors wrote about Spartan military excellence, political organization, educational systems. But the details of what happened to conquered women, vague references, oblique mentions, carefully sanitized language, women of the conquered peoples, Helot populations maintained through natural increase, rituals intended to demonstrate the inferiority of the enslaved. Why the silence? Because even ancient Greeks, who lived in societies that practiced slavery extensively, found the Spartan system disturbing. Athenians kept slaves. Thebes kept slaves. Every major Greek city-state practiced slavery, but they didn't build their entire society on the systematic sexual exploitation of multiple generations of enslaved women. Sparta did, and other Greeks noticed, and they chose not to document it fully, perhaps because it reflected too darkly on Hellenic civilization as a whole. The silence is evidence. What you don't write about reveals what you find unspeakable. Here's what we can document. Archaeological evidence of settlements in former Helot territories shows patterns of household organization consistent with forced cohabitation between Spartan property owners and Helot women. Pottery fragments, building layouts, burial practices all indicate mixed populations living in hierarchical arrangements. Ancient sources confirm the practices. Helotry as inherited status, sexual access as owner's right, forced participation in religious degradations, Cryptia murders as state policy. We know what happened. We know it was systematic. We know it lasted for centuries. The question isn't whether Sparta did this. The question is why we've spent 2,500 years romanticizing them anyway. Movie celebrates Spartan military prowess. Popular culture admires their discipline. Spartan is a compliment meaning tough, focused, militaristically excellent. But Spartan society was built on the systematic sexual exploitation of generations of enslaved women. That's not a footnote to their military success. That is their military success. The warriors could train full-time because Helot women grew the food. Sparta could maintain a professional military class because enslaved women reproduced the labor force. The system functioned because of the machinery we've just described. You can't separate Spartan military excellence from Spartan sexual atrocity. They're the same thing. The atrocity powered the excellence. Every time you see Spartan warriors celebrated in media, remember what's not being shown. The women in the fields, the household slaves, the victims of the Cryptia, the forced participants in Dionysian degradations. That's the true cost of Spartan glory, and it was paid exclusively by the women they conquered. If this exposed the historical reality behind the Spartan myth, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We're going to keep uncovering what ancient civilizations did and what later generations tried to forget. Drop a comment with your thoughts, and I'll see you in the next investigation into the machinery of systematic historical horror.